with effect from 24th April, not 23rd. So the seconder will be moving it in that manner. We'll be proceeding in that manner, seconding it in that manner. Yes, proceed.
Honorable Speaker, I second this request.
And therefore, just for confirmation, confirmation, the seconder. Are you seconding a request or a motion so that we are clear what we are going to vote for? You are seconding, isn't it? Seconding the motion.
The motion.
Okay. Order, members. Order. Order. I therefore propose a question which is that notwithstanding the provisions of Standing Order 2272, which is committal of petitions, this House resolves to extend the period for considerations of public petitions specified hereunder by the Departmental Committee on Education and Research by a further period of 21 days with effect from 24th April 2019. Public petitions on implementation of the localization policy by Teacher Service Commission. 2, transfer of technical and vocational education and training of trainers from the Teacher Service Commission to the Public Service Commission. 3, funding of the co-curricular activities in primary schools. And 4, release of examination results for Mr. Nick Onyango by the Kenya Medical Laboratory Technologies and Technicians Board. Well, we'll give a few members. It's a procedural motion. We'll start with the leader of majority party.
Speaker, as I support, this House members will agree with me, has serious issues with petitions. And petitions is a constitutional issue because it comes from the people who we represent. And Mr. Speaker, I led a delegation of the House Rules and Procedure to the German Bundestag, to Parliament. And in Germany, in that the equivalent of the National Assembly, they receive over 20,000 petitions every year. And we have a report to table. Honorable T.J. Kajwang, who is a member of the House Procedure, is going to table a report to the House leadership this weekend in our retreat, inshallah, if it happens. And I think what we are going to ask the House leadership is to consider forming a committee that will deal with the petitions alone. Because what we have seen is our departmental committees have no time for petitions. They are busy with the bills, they are busy with the budget, they are busy with motions. So I think we might go that route, that we form a committee that will deal with the petitions, or that petitions will be dealt with by committees in a different way. Because petition means you need it to go to the ground. If the petition is from Bura constituency, or if it's from Mwatate constituency, you need to go to the ground and talk to the people and bring a result. And this idea, Mr. Speaker, which we might be forced to amend the standing orders, that again the petition, once it is concluded, it's only sent back to the owner of the petition. No, petitions must be discussed in the chamber. We must discuss in the chamber so that even the people of Kenya can see that the petition they send to Parliament or they give to their member of Parliament is allocated time for debate. So that if the House feels that even we want to amend that petition, we can amend it on the floor of the House. But this story of a petition is a constitutional matter. When people send a petition through their member of Parliament or through to the Speaker, they want concrete implementation of that petition. But here what we have is the standing order says 60 days. There are petitions that have taken 6 months, and committees have not brought it back. So I think going forward, we learn from other jurisdictions, and we sat with the committee that deals with the petitions. In fact, in the German Parliament, the committee that dealt with the petitions is the same committee that deals with issues of human rights, issues of law. legal. But I think over our weekend, the vice chairs, the chairs will be there, and the House leadership. We must agree on how to deal with the petitions. Petitions are losing meaning in our parliament. And petitions are constitutional right of citizens. If it's a land issue, it must be dealt with. So because of procedure, I don't want to speak more. I support, but I think the House needs to learn from other jurisdictions.
Okay, I don't see any major interest on this particular one. We will proceed and put the question. These are procedural members, honorable members. Yeah, cannot take too much time on it. So I put the question, which is that notwithstanding provisions of Standing Order 2272, Committal of Petitions, this House resolves to extend the period for consideration of the public petitions specified hereunder by the Departmental Committee on Education and Research by a further period of 21 days with effect from 24th April 2019. The public petitions on 1, implementation of the localization policy by Teachers Service Commission. 2, transfer of technical and vocational education and training of trainers from the Teacher Service Commission to the Public Service Commission. 3, funding of the co-curricular activities in primary schools. And 4, release of examination results for Nick Onyango by the Kenya Medical Laboratory Technologies and Technicians Board. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 10, the Public Order Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Public Order Act and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 11, the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Act 2015 and for connected purposes.
The next one, next order.
Order number 12, the Labor Relations Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Labor Relations Act.
Very well, and before we go to the next order, let me recognize in the speakers gallery, Dr. Agrey High School from Wundanyi, Taita Taveta. And again, Nguraru Primary School from the same constituency, Wundanyi, Taita Taveta County. They are in the house to learn the procedures and watch the proceedings of the house. Next order.
Order number 13, motion, debate on the President's address, day 1.
Yes, now let's have the leader of majority party.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I was looking for somebody to second for me. Even my leadership is not in the house. But I have found a very competent, one of the only recognized senior medical doctors in this house, Dr. Pukose. Honorable Speaker, to lead from the front, I don't want to use paper notes. So I came with my iPad. This shows that we must go digital. So I've decided not to carry, and I think the ICT people must teach me.
That's very commendable, only that you don't have a username on the one that you have next to you.
No, this is my own iPad. But I really wanted the ICT to tell us how do I upload my notes in future on the iPad on my desk. So, Mr. Speaker, if you have no iPad or you have, like my good friend from Mumias, then there are tutorials. Classes are ongoing. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 24.6, the thanks of this House be recorded for the exposition of public policy contained in the address of His Excellency the President, delivered in Parliament on Thursday, April 4th, 2019, and further notes the following reports submitted by the President in the fulfillment of the provisions of Article 132, subsection 1C, and Article 240, section 7 of the Constitution, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, April 23, 2019. And the first one is the 6th annual report on the progress made in the fulfillment of the international obligation of the Republic. The next one is the 6th annual report on the measures taken and progress achieved in the realization of the national values and principles of governance as enshrined in Article 10 of the Constitution. And finally, the annual report to Parliament on the state of national security. So, Mr. Speaker, as much as we will discuss the speech of the President, Parliament is under obligation to discuss those reports, and I will urge the Executive and also the Cabinet Office and the Chief of Staff of the President to avail more copies, 349 copies, by the end of today to the House so that members can carry those copies, read them, and keep them. Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege to move this motion on the discussion of the state of the nation addressed by His Excellency the President, which he delivered on the 4th of April 2019. And Mr. Speaker, this was the second one in the 12th Parliament, serving his second and last term as a president. And I'm sure he did diligently as per the Constitution in the 5 years of his first administration. Speaker, I really want to first note the importance which the President gave on the transformation of our national economy. And he said our economy needs to be the engine of creating jobs. The Speaker, there's a loud consultation, and more so, the Speaker, there's loud consultation, and more so at the back, you know, my friend, the Indian, Dr. Mheshimiwa Daudi, is consulting with the Kubai and the women rep for Lamu.
That's
you know, it's too early. It has rained. They can have tea at the back. Not to come and bring
other members. Let's allow the leader of majority to proceed in peace.
You know, Mrs.
Giving him a lot of.
You know, Mr. Speaker, she took Atwoli the other day, and he was abusing me and many others. And she has to tell me later why she allowed Atwoli to abuse me in her constituency. Because I'll also go there very soon. Not only to abuse Atwoli, but consequently also deal with her. That is on a light touch, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the President said our economy must be transformative.
What is your point of order, Honorable Abo? Captain Rueda? What is your point of order? What is out of order?
No, I'll deal with that politically.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes, you must put the standing order.
siasa ni nyumbani. Niliahidi watu wangu na nilipata ile target 10.7 million. Kina mama wa Lamu for the first time. Period.
Well, I consider that completely out of order because it is not our business to know what members do in their constituencies.
So, Mr. Speaker, 10-point-something million was raised, but the only issue which was spoken more than 100 times was one Aden Duala and William Ruto. And I'm only saying, as a politician, I'm also organizing another fundraising after Ramadan in Lamu, courtesy of the leadership there, and I'll also raise 20 million and say whatever I want to say. And Honorable Rahema will be part of the delegation. So, Mr. Speaker, our economy must be the engine for creating jobs and opportunities for all Kenyans. That is what the President said. And in his own words, he says, the path to lasting cohesion, decent jobs for our people, can only be achieved in an environment where there is fairness, there is integrity, and the rule of law are observed by all citizens without exception. Mr. Speaker, the President reiterated his commitment to the realization of his 4 big agenda. And he called upon Parliament, Mr. Speaker, to play our constitutional and legislative roles in achieving the President's transformation agenda for this country. In the previous presidential address, which he made on the 2nd of May 2018, this was also a very steadfast commitment by the President. Mr. Speaker, I want to say it. As Parliament, as National Assembly, we have passed all the laws that are relevant to the achievement of the 4 big agenda, from the housing fund to universal health care, to manufacturing, to taxation laws. We, as the National Assembly, want to take the credit. And that is why in the next section of his speech, the President again urged the Houses of Parliament, both the Senate and the National Assembly, to fast-track certain crucial legislation, which include the Land Value Index Amendment Bill, the Fiscal Planning Bill, the Irrigation Bill, the Warehouse Receipts Bill, and the Kenya Roads Bill, which, Mr. Speaker, I want to confirm they are at the mediation stage. And I'm sure we will agree with our colleagues in the Senate, and next week we will make sure that the President will send them to law. That's our obligation. Mr. Speaker, the President also applauded Parliament and more so the National Assembly for the passage of over 22 bills last year, which were enacted into acts of Parliament. The President too commended Parliament for the passage of a very important piece of legislation that established the Kenya Coast Guards Services Act, which will establish our first and the only one in the region, the first Coast Guard service in the region, in East Africa, in SADC, in West Africa. We are the pioneers in establishing Kenya Coast Guards. Of course, this House dealt with the Petroleum Act, the Energy Act, and the National Youth Service, which today has a council which is independent of other arms of government to make sure that the resources of the National Youth Service, as appropriated by this House, are protected. Speaker, we take on the President's administration intention to present what he called the Sovereignty Wealth Fund Bill. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, if it comes to the House, will establish a fund and provide a legal framework together with, in order to guide the investment of revenue from oil, gas, mineral, and of course other natural resources, so that we know that Sovereignty Wealth Fund will tell us how much Turkana will get, how much Garissa will get if they get minerals on Antaveta and all the other regions. So we really want to ask the Office of the Attorney General and the Cabinet Office to fast-track the Sovereignty Wealth Fund and bring it to Parliament this session. Of course, the President has also underscored the progress realized in the past year. Kenya ratified 3 multilateral treaties to enhance market access for both Kenyan products in many countries, including China, and share critical information and create jobs. Yes, I have it. Thank you. And Mr. Speaker, the President boldly stated that there will be no turning back on the war on corruption and impunity. But, Mr. Speaker, the President also agreed with the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, as the head of the judiciary, that people who are arraigned in court will be convicted based on evidence and facts, not on media propaganda, not on what the President called, and I quote his word, juvenile, or was it juvenile vigilante or jungle vigilante? Yes, he said jungle vigilante. Jungle vigilante means what goes on in funerals and in political rallies, where you say, Dismas Baraza is a thief, Honorable Duale is a thief. If you are in that category, who want to charge Kenyans outside the perimeter of the Constitution and purport to take the role of the investigative agencies and the prosecutorial agencies and the judiciary, then you fall within what the President said, jungle vigilante. Whether you appear, you make me appear in the Nation daily headlines or the Standard or the Star 100 times, that will not make that person guilty. So the president said, let us fight the war on corruption with the facts, with the evidence, and let us allow the investigative agencies, which are only answerable to this House. EACC is not even, in my opinion, not answerable to the Senate. EACC, DPP are answerable to the Chair of Legal Affairs on behalf of the 349 of ours and his members. They are the ones who appropriate money on their behalf. They are the ones who give them more resources in consultation with the National Treasury. They are the ones who oversight. And Mr. Speaker, in 2010 Constitution, this country, the people of Kenya, deliberately created offices that are answerable to Parliament. The Office of the Auditor General, the Office of the Controller of Budget, the Office of the EACC, and DPP, and even the Inspector General of Police. So, Mr. Speaker, those offices are independent and they must maintain that independence. And they must deal with corruption and in all its form and present evidence and facts to give them conviction. Mr. Speaker, I'll give you a very good example. The media wrote that 9 billion was lost in NYS. Today, the people who are in court, they are only accused of stealing not less than 67 million. So the question is, what happened to the 8.4 billion? You know what happened? We expect the 9 billion people to be taken to court. Not was lost. You know, when you say it was lost, you are falling within the definition of jungle vigilante. And a member of parliament cannot be put in that. Vigilantes are not very good people, you know. Honorable Bayer knows in the coast what vigilante means. So I think the war on corruption, we will support the president. We will support the institutions that deal with it. But let us not execute corruption issues in the media. Let us not create perception that so-and-so has squandered his CDF when he has not. Let us not deal with corruption in funerals. Let us not create an atmosphere that is not conducive for Kenya in the war against corruption. We want to protect, and the corruption begins. The war against corruption must be fought by this House. This House, Mr. Speaker, has a role of oversight. We are the ones who appropriate. Why do we have? We need to have more reports recommending the DCI and the EACC to carry investigations, like the way we did yesterday with IBC, that OT Mofo must be investigated. So the committees of this House, you are under obligation to help the president and government in the war against corruption. The second thing that the president really talked about, and we agree with him, is on bringing the nation together. Even in our constituencies, we reach out to the people who lost to us, so that they give you an opportunity of 5 years for you to work. I mean, if you don't talk to your opponent in your constituency, when you are in one funeral, he's in another funeral. And I think the Christian community must stop politicians who use only funerals to play politics. Please learn from the Muslims. Our funeral takes only for 5 minutes. We do funerals for 5 minutes. And if you don't know, I can take you to Langata even this afternoon. We bury the dead for 5 minutes. You bury the dead for 12 hours, from morning to evening. Sometimes you fight over the dead people. Politicians fight until you lose that respect for the departing soul. I think the clergy must not allow politicians. If you want to speak to people, call a rally, call a meeting. But you only look for weddings, you look for funerals, You go, you know? No, I mean, churches is an obligation. You need to go. In fact, the whole week you might sin. So you need to go. If you are a sinner, and politicians sin. So you need to go to church. And you know, I'm one person who builds a lot of mosques. Members will tell you, and most of us here. You know, is it a crime to build a mosque or a church? If you think the money is coming from money laundering, you stand up before the church, Harambe starts, and says the money of Honorable so-and-so is money laundering, and bring evidence. But we must build more churches. If you are stingy and your heart is dark and you don't want to appreciate what God has given you, the wealth you have been given by God. So you must share some part of your wealth with his ministry. Who is forcing you? We are building a mosque in Isli in the 6th Street. It's going to cost us 1.2 billion. We have so far raised 300 million, and we will build it because it is a house of God, and God will bring the money. But there are people who their heart, they don't believe in God, they believe in magic. They believe in other things. Please believe in your magic. Leave those who want to build churches to build churches. Those who want to build mosques to build mosques. Kenya is free. In the constitution, there is freedom of worship. Why do you want to measure how I behave in a church or in a mosque? So those of you who don't want to look at your wallet and remove even sadaka, you will be asked. The member for Kisumu Central has never been in the house. I just saw him entering now and tell him we are not in Siaya County Assembly. He will wait and listen and get his time. Mr. Speaker, the final thing I want to speak to, which is very important, and we must agree today here, that we must unite the nation. Coming from a very divisive election of 2017, coming from a period where my former leader was sworn in Uhuru Park, where my good friend Miguna is out of the country for no good reason. He's a Kenyan. Why is he out of the country? He should come back. Mr. Speaker, based on what was happening, we must reach out to each Kenyan, every village, every tribe, every political party leader, and all of us hold together and preach unity. It is the interest of our citizens. But that unity of the president, and the president is very sincere, he made it more clear when we had the annual breakfast meeting, where he called Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, he called Honorable William Ruto, Honorable Raila Odinga, Honorable himself, and all of them as the key political leaders, they hold hands. The president, both in spirit and letter, is committed to the unity of our nation. But Mr. Speaker, there are some of us from both sides of the divide who believe that this handshake, this unity, must be selective. That this unity must be like a menu when you go to a hotel, that you can select kwashe, you can select anjera, you can select nyiri nyiri, you can select aleso. For those who don't know, you can consult me later. These are staple food of my community. If you want unity, I cannot say I am going to have unity with Honorable Makali Mulu, but when it comes to Manzo, we are enemies. That is what's happening in Kenya. And the president is the only person who is sincere. The president, Uhuru Kenyatta, is sincere. He wants to leave a legacy of a united country. But the rest of us, starting with the former prime minister, including Honorable William Ruto, including Kalonzo Musyoka, including Musalia Mudavadi, including the members of parliament and senators, and that every weekend when we go to the Senate, when we go to our constituencies, we talk a different language. That, this unity is for this corner. This unity is for that other corner. This unity wants to fix this group. So let us, all of us here, agree. If you want to have a unity with the President Uhuru Kenyatta, there is no way you will avoid William Ruto. It's called the presidency. There is no way even you'll avoid Honorable Duale. The moment I see you by your language and your body structure, that you only want to have a unity deal with the president and not Honorable Duale, we will not agree. That will not agree. So we must agree, all of us. For the same, like you cannot have unity and handshake with the former prime minister and say some section of his party you will not have unity with. We want the unity to be with the president, with the former prime minister, with all the political leaders, with all of us members of parliament. This unity goes to our constituencies, to our counties, because at times, even ourselves, we have got, constituency conflicts, we have got county conflicts, we have got ethnic conflicts. We want, please, members of parliament, I really want to urge you today that the most important thing that President Uhuru Kenyatta has done for our country is to preach and give us the card of unity. That unity is at risk because of politics, because of mistrust, because people want to deal with history, people want to deal with the future. Let us first unite our country, and once we unite our country, 2022, inshallah, when we reach, we even don't know whether we'll reach, the people of Kenya will make a decision. So I think on the unity of our country is important, and I have an opportunity to ask our members, please, even let us not use the speech of the president that will be discussed the next 4 days to polarize the nation. Let us not polarize the nation. Let us not, sow seed of discord. Let us not be the leaders who will plant, enmity between communities and between political leaders and between communities and regions. I really want us to use this opportunity of the president's speech that all of us together, we go back and we agree on how to support the unity deal between our two leaders. We are the troops. We are the people who will help them cement that deal. And let us be a deal, let us be a unity which is honest, a unity which is, everybody knows about it, so that we make unity with all the leaders. Reach out to Kalonzo Musyoka, reach out to Musalia Mudavadi, reach out to Moses Wetangula. He was removed from the Senate as a minority leader. We must reach out to him. And you tell him, my friend, yes, that happened, but now we are on another course of uniting the country. We cannot unite the country in half-half. We cannot unite the country on how you want it. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the president's two main issues was on the war on corruption, which is said everyone, including parliament, must take a role, but it must be corruption devoid of mischief, on witch hunting, on vigilante justice. But again, we give an opportunity to those institutions that are answerable to parliament. If they have issues, call them to the committee. As the DPP, he briefs the committees. He tables a report every 3 months. EACC table a report every 3 months. The DCI, through the National Police Service, tables a report every month. The Controller of Budget tables a report on how she's giving money to counties. The Auditor General, as late as yesterday, has given us the most controversial Eurobond, how it was used and how it was raised. So those institutions, you can call them at any time of the day you want. You can ask them questions. Let us not deal with them when we are out in the field. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and ask Honorable Pukose to second.
Honorable Pukose.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to second. Honorable Speaker, I'm a Christian. And as a Christian, Honorable Duale has led the way in moving with a reconciliatory tone. Honorable Speaker, as a Christian, there is the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer says, forgive those who trespass against us, forgive us as we forgive those who trespass against us. Okay? No, that's how it is. Honorable Speaker, today in the morning we were sharing with the Honorable Amunyinyi in the gym. And he was saying, why is it that it is easier for us to ask for forgiveness from God and very difficult for human beings to forgive those others who trespass against us? I think it is in our nature that we don't find that forgiveness to others. Mr. Speaker, in the support, we have a word called Mwinyanet Agomuting. In this, Muting means you spin a story against your friend in such a way that you repeat it over a period of time. It seems it is true. Yet, it might not be true. Mr. Speaker, when the president delivered his speech on 4th of April afternoon in this House, it was a speech that was loaded with a lot of message to the nation and to the House in particular, and to those of us who are in the leadership positions. He said, we will not roll back on issues of fighting corruption, because corruption has eaten this country to such a level that we're not able to deliver good health care in this nation. We're not able to build a road without somebody asking for kickbacks. We're not able to do any contract without people getting a certain percentage. Mr. Speaker, that is the president for this country. He means well for our nation. And that's why he went to an extent of doing his second handshake, because the first handshake was with William Ruto in the forming of Jubilee, and this was a second handshake with the Honorable Raila Odinga to reconcile the nation. We are hoping that our colleagues who are in the NASA coalition look at the depth of what the president means. You cannot shake hands with Uhuru Kenyatta as a president of this country and leave out William Ruto. William Ruto is part of the presidency of this country. And it's important for us not to get that out of our hands, that we should not demonize anybody in as far as corruption is concerned. Let's not be trivial. Let's not be political. Anybody with political innuendos in as far as corruption is fighting is actually fighting the issue of the handshake, is fighting the unity of this country. When it comes to the issue of the 6th report on the security of the nation, Mr. Speaker, it is important that those who are in the security sector in this country do not undermine the president's fight and president's purpose to unite this country. When we hear of our members of parliament, their security being denied, it means an undermining of the president's purpose to unite this country. So those who are in security positions, you should know that Uhuru Kenyatta is still the president of this country. And respect him and make sure that you carry out your duties diligently. With those few remarks, I support this motion.
You second. You did not, you know, Honorable Dr. Pukose, you are the one loudly correcting others. So yes.
Honorable Speaker, I've said I've seconded.
No, you did not say that.
I've seconded, I said.
Yeah, you've now just said it.
Even in my initial opening remarks, I said I stand to second.
What is most important is the end, not the beginning.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for your correction.
So therefore, I propose a question which is that pursuant to provisions of Standing Order 24-6, the thanks of the House be recorded for the exposition of the public policy contained in the address of His Excellency, the President, delivered in Parliament on Thursday, 4th April 2019. Further notes the following reports submitted by the President in the fulfillment of the provisions of Article 132(1)(c) and 247 of the Constitution laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 23rd April 2019. A. Sixth annual report of the progress made in fulfillment of international obligations of the Republic. B, sixth annual report of the measures taken and progress achieved in realization of the national values and principles of governance. And C, annual report to Parliament on the state of the national security. Yes, and top on the list here, I'll give opportunity, and it's 5 minutes each, is Honorable Mwakuona Mwashako, member for Undanyi.
It's me. Mr. Speaker, I think
You seem to have an issue with your mic, so let's see the nearest one. Maybe use the one, and yeah, you have one close to you now, please. Go to the next one. There is a next one after that. Let's see if it is working. The next one. There is a next one there. Come to the... There is still another one. Yes, that one is working.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the onset, I want to say that I support the motion for the presidential speech and just make a few remarks. But as I do that, Mr. Speaker, I am very excited this morning that in the Speaker's Gallery, I have students from my constituency, my former school, Dr. Agri High School, 25 boys, who are visiting Parliament to learn a few things. Dr. Agri is the best performing school in my constituency, and particularly in the Coast region. Number two, I have Nguraru students, class 7 and 8. The school was also the best school in my constituency, and I'm excited that they're here this morning. And I have the top performers in Veruga Ward, Veruga and Kishushe, top 10 schools. I picked 10 students who are top in their class, in their schools, and they're also here with us. So I have 75 students witnessing what is happening in the National Assembly today. So I'm a very excited member of Parliament today. Mr. Speaker, on the onset, as I've said, I support the President's motion, President's address to the nation that was tabled to this House. Mr. Speaker, the President was very clear that he will strive to remain faithful to his call as the President of this country. He committed that he will not look back on matters, on the confidence that the country or the country citizens placed on him, Mr. Speaker. This was a very good thing that Mr. President spoke in this House, Mr. Speaker. But I have a few things that I want to highlight, Mr. Speaker. Number one, His Excellency, the President spoke very candidly about the infrastructural programs, how much we have been able to increase our road network, to raise it to bitumen standards in this country, Mr. Speaker. We know for sure that there's progress that has been made since His Excellency became the President, first term and now this term. However, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that those people around the President, even the leadership of this House, Mr. Speaker, to help the President fulfill his pledges that he's made to this country. I was speaking about, Mr. Speaker, a road that the President launched in the year 2017 in my county. A road starting from Bura, going to Mugange, going to Undanyi, going to Mbale, and connecting to Mwatate Voi Road. Mr. Speaker, this road was launched by the President, and we saw a contractor who came on site. But to date, Mr. Speaker, we have not seen anything happening on that road. That means, Mr. Speaker, there are people around the President that either are not helping him achieve or realize his pledges that he's made to this country. The people down there, the people where these pledges are made, Mr. Speaker, and I know these pledges are all over the country, are asking themselves, what happens if the President can commit on something, and then the same has not been followed up, has not been done? It means either we do not take very seriously the commitments that the President makes. So, Mr. Speaker, this also speaks to the airports that His Excellency spoke about. He spoke about that we've upgraded airports, we've upgraded airports, Mr. Speaker, and they have airstrips that in this country, like Ikanga airstrips in Voi, Mr. Speaker, that for years, money was put in that airstrip, Mr. Speaker, but to date, it remains about 10% to be complete. But 3 years down the line, nothing is being done. So, Mr. Speaker, when the President talks about Big Four, we get very excited. But now, we are only remaining with about 2-3 years for him to exit the stage. But we're wondering, if people around him, if this parliament, if the executive does not help the president achieve this big four, it may still remain a pipe dream. We may not go anywhere, Mr. Speaker. He talked about livelihoods of the people that have been improved since he took power, Mr. Speaker. It is unfortunate that we have programs and projects that have been earmarked, contracts, financing agreements signed, but to date, we do not see anything happening unto that project. I'm talking about Mzima 2, for example, Mr. Speaker. The president has spoke not once, not twice, about Mzima 2, the water that will come from Zima, that will feed Taita Taveta, the entire of Taita Taveta, starting with Mwatate, starting with Voi, going to Undanyi, and now later on going to Mombasa and Kwale and Kilifi counties. Mr. Speaker, we know that agreements, finance agreements have been executed. But we were wondering what is happening to the country that the president can make such a huge commitment. This is almost a 30 billion project, Mr. Speaker. But to date, nothing is happening. So, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I know the president.
One minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
1 minute only.
As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I know the president means very well to unite this country. I know the president means so well to make sure that this country remains as united as it was even before independence, Mr. Speaker. But we have issues around marginalization, Mr. Speaker. We know one time I traveled to Germany, Mr. Speaker, and I noticed how East Germany is being promoted from the equalization fund that was set during the reunification in 1990. To date, that equalization fund continues to support East Germany counties, Mr. Speaker, or federal. Today, we have marginalization, that equalization fund that has been removed. Taita Taveta has been removed from equalization fund. Communities that are small communities feel that they are alienated. They feel that they are not part of this country, Mr. Speaker. Politicians go around, even as top leadership, they only count on big communities that have numbers. But communities that have small numbers, Mr. Speaker, we do not feel that we are part of this country. When it comes to appointment, Mr. Speaker.
Now your minute is over.
When it comes...
Your minute is over. And I hope the students from your constituency can see how a debater you have grown to be in a very short while. So we'll give the next, will be the Honorable Nanok Epuyo, member for Turkana West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to make my contribution or add my voice to the presidential speech. Mr. Speaker, overall, the address of the president to the nation in this August House can be said to be hope-inspiring. It is important for this country, Mr. Speaker, to keep the hope alive, because the challenges that this country is facing at this time are growing and they are becoming enormous. And therefore the leadership, Mr. Speaker, of the country needs to speak and read from the same script. And that is what the presidential speech generally meant to do. However, Mr. Speaker, there is need for us to move from words and speeches to action in this country. And yes, we can all see that there is action going on, particularly so in the areas of dealing with corruption. We can see that serious activity is going on by the institutions charged by the Constitution of the Republic to handle issues of corruption. And Mr. Speaker, that fight needs to be supported by the leadership. And as the President said, it will be dealt with, it will be handled as per the law, that we will not allow a vigilante justice to be ingrained in our republic. And that is the way to go, Mr. Speaker. That is a call that needs to be supported. Mr. Speaker, the leadership of this country, right from the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, for sure will do this country justice if they can tone down the rhetoric and the talk that is deviating and diverting attention of Kenyans from the real issues. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, the rains have started. And what is happening, Mr. Speaker, is whereas we were suffering during the drought period, now we are going to suffer again because of the rains, because of our way of doing things and preparing for some of these activities or events. And you can see that floods are going to wash people and properties in this country. When the drought was there, it was decimating our livestock, our food situation. And so, Mr. Speaker, leadership need to put their minds into activities that are going to change the way we do things in this country. And this is part of what the President's speech meant to achieve. I come from Turkana County, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency, there is the famous Lotikipi Aquifer, which was said to have water resources able to run this country for 70 years. That all the country of...
Sisi kama wananchi na hasa viongozi na tukatenga kiwango vile vile cha kusaidia wale wananchi wale wanafuga kuku. Ndio walisema ile pesa ya kuzunguka, unapatia pesa alafu unarudisha inapewa mwingine. Ndio sisi tuweze kukabiliana na wale wanaleta chakula kutoka nje, kwa sababu labda nchi zao zimetenga vitengo ambao zinawasaidia. Vile vile alinguzia mambo ya masomo, na hakuna maendeleo yanayopatikana kama hakuna masomo. Na mimi ningesema vile Loiro, na nikipatia kama mfano, masomo yako chini kwa sababu hatuna vifaa vya kutosha vya masomo. Unaenda unapata, Bwana Spika, kuna madarasa iko na zaidi ya watoto 200 kwa darasa moja. Mwalimu atasomesa namna gani? Na vile kitengo kimetengwa, Wizara ya Elimu yaangalia yale maneno yameumia zaidi, ndio tuweze kujimudu kimaendeleo. Na mimi naunga na nifurahie vile alisema mambo ya uwiano wa Kenya wote tufanya kazi kama kikundi kimoja. Asanteni. Na nimeunga.
Very well. We shall now have Honorable Manzo Kitonga, member for Makueni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity as part of the thanks of the House on the presidential speech. Mr. Speaker, the President concentrated on 4 main areas of development of his agenda during his term. And the most important is food security, Mr. Speaker. Already just before the rains came in, food security has been a big issue in this country. And even when the rains are late, we are not sure whether they are going to be sufficient enough for there to be a proper harvest. And therefore, the government should not stop its efforts to make sure that there is food security in the country. And the most important, Mr. Speaker, is if we could do irrigation in this country, and the question of dams, which could sufficiently irrigate our country, have been on the turbulence, and it has not been pleasant, other than one dam which is in my constituency, the Thwake Dam, which is also having a slow start and a disorganized start. And we want to make sure that it's realized and we could irrigate the parts of Kitui and Makueni, which are much likely going to be a food basket of this country if there is proper irrigation. And also that particular dam will make sure that there is continuous supply of water down at the Guraru irrigation schemes, which really never took off. Mr. Speaker, if we were good at food storage and proper supply of water and irrigation, this country will not be talking of food security. So it's one of the areas we need to concentrate on, and most important, this area is affected by corruption. If there were a proper fight of corruption in this country, I am aware that there is sufficient evidence against certain individuals who have stolen monies from this country through projects and through other means. That evidence should be tabled, and the DPP should not be shy to prosecute anybody in this country so long as they are found with corruption. And even just as has been proposed in this House, although the Constitution is clear now after interpretation by the Supreme Court that you cannot actually sentence anyone to death in this country. I believe in the next referendum, Mr. Speaker, we should come out strong and change our constitution to make sure that those who plunder resources of this country not only face life sentence, but actually be sentenced to death. If we were to get that serious with corruption, then most of these other activities will start moving right. We'll have food security. The next issue was the issue of housing. There seems not to be proper map in the country on how to house and who to house in this country. Although there is a law and we pass regulation, and the matter has now gone to court. Away from what's happening in court, on the other side of it, the counties have to have a system that the people who are not housed at all are eventually housed through the structures we already have, which have been working over the years. Housing is very, very important, and especially if we are to do housing, it must be clear who is going to be the beneficiary. I saw something on television of a family in Kilifi. Yesterday there was some coverage of a family, a mother and 2 kids who are swept by water in Kibera because their house is near a river. And many, many other people are threatened when there are floods in this country. So we need proper planning of the housing, but most important on the security issue, which he tackled. Our own men who keep security of this country, the policemen, have a lot of land allocated all over the country. Every county, every constituency where there is a police station, there is sufficient land where housing can be done by this government. So if we are to be very serious on housing, we'll first house our police officers properly and all security agents to get proper housing, to settle their families, so that now they can defend this country against terrorism, against thuggery. Recently, you had in some parts of the world, there was serious striking by terrorists. And people were attacked in churches and the places of worship over Easter. And over 150,000 were killed by terrorists. Kenya has gone through terrorism. And one of the ways is to protect Kenyans against terrorism and to make sure that we have no more Kenyans dying of terrorism because of insecurity. And I want to believe in the sincerity of the president in his speech and thank him also for being very humble to have agreed to have discussion and to share an handshake and to make sure that he reconciles the country. Because without reconciling the country, then we cannot achieve.
Shall we have Honorable Jaldesa Dida?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice. Mr. Speaker, I will have done disservice to the people of Isiolo if I will not have had an opportunity to contribute to this debate. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that I am rising to partially support the presidential debate with some bit of reservation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will start by addressing the national values as stipulated in Article 10 of the Kenyan Constitution, which entail patriotism, national unity, human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, and non-discrimination, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the representative of Isiolo County, one of the marginalized county in terms of development, high poverty level, inadequate resource allocation, persistent drought, Mr. Speaker, I strongly feel that the president failed to address the key measures taken to address those marginalization. Mr. Speaker, well, the president has stated measures to revive agriculture sector, especially through irrigation front and reviving the coffee sector. The president left out the pastoralists who contribute 10 billion to the economy of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pastoralists is a way of life which we so proudly, Mr. Speaker, embrace. And it covers an ASAL region, which is almost 70% of the landmass of this country. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Almighty Lord for hearing our prayers and that we started getting rains from yesterday. Mr. Speaker, but we feel abandoned by the president when he could propose to allocate 10 billion to an amorphous body by the name BBI initiative, and he fails to mention the pastoralist community which were affected by drought. Mr. Speaker, in my view, building bridges is nothing but just another amorphous body like Eleweke and Kitangatanga, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it demeans this House when the president will talk of allocating 10 billion and he doesn't talk about drought. Mr. Speaker, the people of Isiolo County I represent had their livestock taken in 2017 under the off-take project, Mr. Speaker. And to date, Mr. Speaker, those poor farmers owe the government to the tune of 43 million. Mr. Speaker, I raised a question in this House. We followed it up. We were lied to, Mr. Speaker, that the same budget will be put in the supplementary. But I am sad to report that there is nothing done. Mr. Speaker, as I continue, Mr. Speaker, the president talked about the culture of handshake as expression of goodwill. Mr. Speaker, friendship builds trust and reconciliation. And on that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to agree with the president. But, Mr. Speaker, I have a reservation when the same initiative is selectively applied, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am concerned when civil servants, the likes of Mr. Kibicho, the PS, uses his position to undermine the constitutional office holders, Mr. Speaker, like an office of a deputy president, where security is a key factor in those offices, Mr. Speaker, and a deputy president come for a function and there are no security. When members of parliament, Mr. Speaker, are intimidated and have their securities removed. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, the president talked about the improved economy. Unless we are talking the economy of China, Mr. Speaker, I don't see an improved economy in this country. We are in a country where citizens...
You know, Honorable Atad, you don't need to raise your hand. You know, I can tell from the screen. Although you are top, I almost thought, you know, Honorable Atadi, please, you have the floor. But I'll be guided by the screen, not the hand. You've been very consistent in raising the hand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to raise my hand because there appeared to have been a problem because I was the first to enter these chambers. And the previous speaker might have tampered with the order.
No, it's not possible.
Thank
Please,
you, Mr.
you have
Speaker.
the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to support the motion on the President's State of the Nation address. Mr. Speaker, the President spoke about many things, but I would like to just mention a few. One, the President spoke about improving the ease of doing business in Kenya. Right now, Mr. Speaker, in the World Bank report of ease of doing business, Kenya is ranking below some of our neighbors, like Morocco, like Mauritius, and the President candidly said that he is going to introduce reforms that would make doing business in Kenya easy. Mr. Speaker, you know the economy expands when people are doing business. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this was one of the most critical things that the President spoke about. As a member of this House, I will be waiting to see some of those reforms when they come to be able to allow this economy to prosper. Mr. Speaker, the President spoke about, Mr. Speaker, in the same breath, in the same line of ease of doing business, he spoke about creating SME credit guarantee scheme that is going to ensure that the SME sector in Kenya is rejuvenated, is grown, and that our SMEs that are struggling today, courtesy of our arrogant banking sector, will be able to get an opportunity to be able to do business outside the financial sector. Mr. Speaker, this is something that is in my heart, and I think, Mr. Speaker, if this one is implemented, then, Mr. Speaker, we are going to have an economy that is booming. Mr. Speaker, the President spoke about security and introducing reforms that are also going to help us do away with the Al-Shabaab and the terrorist group that is bringing chaos in this country. And Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to say that maybe the Oduma number, which is being implemented, is part of those reforms that are going to ultimately introduce permanent security and address the security challenges. But, Mr. Speaker, I think the President paid a lip service to the war on corruption. Mr. Speaker, you cannot, as the President of the Republic of Kenya, you have the intelligence reports of your ministers who are corrupt. And, Mr. Speaker, you don't have to wait for another organ which is created to tell you who is corrupt to be arrested. Mr. Speaker, it is shameful that the President continues to sit in cabinet with some cabinet secretaries who have been implicated in corruption scandals. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the President that let him not wait for EACC, for all these bodies. Let him fire some of these people, because he knows very well that they have committed criminal offenses in their ministries, and he cannot wait for a court process. Why does he continue to sit in cabinet with some ministers when he knows very well that they are corrupt? So, Mr. Speaker, I think the President did a lip service on the fight against corruption. He has the support of Kenyans, and he should not fear. He should not fear members of parliament or a grouping of members of parliament who are agitating against sacking of some ministers. I think the President has powers to do that. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, on the question of handshake, Mr. Speaker, the majority leader is talking about handshake and saying that the handshake should be cascaded, should be devolved. Mr. Speaker, let me inform them that the handshake was about two presidents, the President of the Republic of Kenya and the People's President. So Honorable Duale and the rest should not come and tell us that the handshake should be devolved so that I and Mr. Duale should have handshake, I and William Ruto should have handshake. The handshake is between two presidents, and that is the way it must work. There is nobody, Duale or Ruto did not go to the ballot to look for the votes of presidency. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a point that must be noted. The handshake as is going to be implemented.
Order, Honorable Atandi. What is it, Honorable Joyce Korir?
Honorable Speaker, is it in order for the honorable members to mislead the House and the country at large that we have two presidents in this country? I thought the members are awake. Do we have two presidents in this country?
You know, let's even not discuss that, because everyone here should take judicial notice. We have one president, and that is completely clear. We have one president. Honorable Atandi, please. Order, is that, are you on record? Very well. Honorable Atandi.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for that clarification. What I wanted to conclude by saying is that, Mr. Speaker, we know that the prosperity of this country depends on the unity of Kenyans. And the handshake has created an environment where all Kenyans are united, and all Kenyans are thinking in the same direction. We don't want members of parliament or any other group of members of parliament to bring confusion to this country by telling us that there should be another handshake of people.
Very well, Honorable Atandi, your time is up. I had given you 1 minute because of that intervention, and that is gone. I have 3 interventions. I don't know, Masara. and the members who had the intervention seem to be removing them as fast. Honorable Iringo, what is out of order?
Mr. Chair, I have
Honorable Kubai, what is out of order? You seem to have pressed an intervention. Honorable Kubai, if you wanted to speak, you shall definitely speak because I can tell you are on the screen. So you get your time to speak.
But now it won't go off, Mr. Speaker, because you have already given me.
My screen, I know at what point you are, Honorable Kubai. And please don't use the intervention to catch the speaker's eye. Honorable Kingora Makau, you seem to have pressed an intervention. What is out of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At one point, Mr. Speaker, I was raising on a point of order, wondering why the Speaker, I think Honorable Watante, was referring to two presidents. Mr. Speaker, it is public knowledge that the Honorable Kalonzo is the president of the China relations. Mr. Speaker, there is no way the president.
Order, Honorable Makau. Order, Honorable Makau. I had spoken to that. It is you now who is gravitating towards being out of order. I had spoken to that, and that is settled. The next to speak to this is Honorable Metito Judah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, basically, because I have 5 minutes, the President spoke of 3 items. One has been spoken many times about the national unity. Second was the issue of the Big Four, which is development agenda, and the issue of corruption. Mr. Speaker, among the 3, let me just say something about the third one, which is corruption. Mr. Speaker, we all know that without fighting corruption, basically the other 2 issues, and mostly the development one on the Big Four, is going to be just but a talking show, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, on the fight against corruption, I think we should be very cautious, Mr. Speaker, and allow those bodies that have been constitutionally given that mandate to carry that work, because many a times that the President and also many of us have spoken about the confidence we have in those institutional or those institutions that are established to fight corruption. But, Mr. Speaker, because at times I think as a House, we even overstep our mandate. Like at times I see reports in this House that we adapt and we say, so and so, or this institution has been barred from doing A, B, C, D in terms of business in this country. And I don't think, Mr. Speaker, as a House, we have the mandate to judge or to actually determine the guilt of anyone or any institution, Mr. Speaker. The much we can do as a House is to propose for further investigation by the relevant institution and not actually to judge an institution with finality that they are corrupt or they have mishandled ABCD. And, Mr. Speaker, matters corruption. I think it's sometimes very interesting to see even people whose past have been questioned there before. Nowadays, they're the loudest, really speaking of fight on corruption, Mr. Speaker. At times, you just left wondering and actually agree with the statement that those who live in stone houses should not throw, in glass houses, should not store thrones, Mr. Speaker. And I am always reminded by us as leaders, we should actually not forget that the privilege, the honor that the Kenyan population bestowed on us to represent them in this August House, Mr. Speaker, we represent them and we represent everyone, Mr. Speaker. And this is why I say that, Mr. Speaker. When we sit in this House and we keep talking of corrupt civil servants who may not have an opportunity to defend themselves on the floor of this House, Mr. Speaker, and then we have already adjudged them with finality that they are corrupt. Like many speakers have said, the president is sitting in cabinet with corrupt cabinet secretaries. But at times when you demand that they be sacked and then they haven't even been found guilty, Mr. Speaker, you fail to understand that you are a leader of those civil servants, Mr. Speaker. We represent them, they come from our constituencies. And at times I ask myself, Mr. Speaker, even the elected leaders, Mr. Speaker, many of us here have got court cases on corruption, Mr. Speaker. But no one has ever said that you should leave your seat. We always rush to defend ourselves and say, let the due process go on until it is finalized, until you are found guilty. But we are very quick to say so and so just because there was a story in the newspaper perceived that he had been corrupt in this way, Mr. Speaker. We are quick to forget our role as leaders, that we are also the leaders of those who cannot be on the floor of this house. And then we demand that we crucify, Mr. Speaker. We destroy their careers. And that's why I agree with the president when he said he will not go to, agree with the vigilante justice. We must give the due process, the legal way to go its course, Mr. Speaker, and bring this country together. Because if we talk of national unity, it can only be national unity when we give every one of us a fair, just trial, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I beg to support.
Honorable Mogaka Kemosi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to partially support the motion on the President's address. Mr. Speaker, during the presidential address, the report majorly was based on Article 10(2) of the Constitution, which provides for the national values and principles of governance, which include patriotism, national unity, rule of law, human dignity, equity, social justice, integrity, transparency, sustainable development, and the rest. Mr. Speaker, the presidential address mainly centered on 2 or 3 main issues. That is the unity of the nation, development of the nation, as well as corruption. Mr. Speaker, I partially supported the presidential address simply because it touched on core development areas. Mr. Speaker, the President in his address touched on devolution, where he was particularly or categorically explained that 1.7 trillion shillings have been released to the county government since the year 2013 to date. We all appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the role the devolution or how the devolution is working in this country. But Mr. Speaker, we will also be keen to point out that Kenyans have not fully enjoyed the fruits of devolution. This is because, Mr. Speaker, in some areas the fruits of devolution have not been felt. More particularly, Mr. Speaker, if I can speak where I come from, we have a county, hospital, level 5 county hospital, which before devolution was being managed by the national government. Upon the county government taking over, Mr. Speaker, Nyamira level 5 hospital is in a state of a monument. The people of Nyamira could not feel the fruits of development. Why did the level 5 or the 10 district hospital is in a pathetic state? Mr. Speaker, Kenyans will definitely support devolution if they are able to feel the fruits of devolution. Devolution was not intended to punish them further. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it's high time that the monies which go to the counties are meant to develop the areas which the people of those particular counties feel should be developed. Mr. Speaker, if you look at most of the counties, truly speaking, the wage bill is more than the development funds which are set aside for development. You cannot have 80% of the funds going to payment of salaries and wages, and you remain with only 20% for development. Kenya, we will never develop if that is the way we should go. Mr. Speaker, the President spoke about the development. And in my thinking, the development of this nation should be based on equity. Mr. Speaker, where I come from, more particularly West Mugrango, we've not been having any national government development project for the last 5 years. It's only recently, Mr. Speaker, through the intervention of the Deputy President, that a technical training institute is underway to be established in West Mugrango. Mr. Speaker, the President, during the campaign, or even before the campaign, had promised the people of West Mugrango that the road linking Pondeni, Magombo, Makairo, Sironga, Bonyunyu Road will be tarmacked. Up to date, Mr. Speaker, none has been done. This is an area where the people of this particular area, Nyamira County particularly, they depend on tea. The roads are impassable. People are suffering. If this order cannot be implemented for development, how then do we expect that those areas will be able to develop? How do we expect to have equity while some of the areas are being developed? Mr. Speaker, finally, I also want to applaud the President, more particularly when he spoke about corruption. In this particular time, Mr. Speaker, the President was very candid, the President was very categorical, and he promised the nation that in the fight against corruption, the rule of law will be followed. We are not...
Next is Honorable Kubai. To my left now, Honorable Dr. Makali Muru.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me the chance also to add my voice into this important debate on the presidential address. Honorable Speaker, it's actually a constitutional requirement, and it's important that the President was able to address the House. From his speech, Honorable Speaker, just want to pick about 3 items because of the time limitation, even though I would have wanted to talk a lot about other things. But let me focus on the issue of the national unity, Honorable Speaker. In terms of the national unit, the President did emphasize in more details on what is expected in terms of Kenya remaining one country and remaining a united country. And to me, what was very, very important is the kind of focus he put on the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative, Mr. Speaker. I remember in his speech, he actually mentioned so many times we are not going to look back when it comes to the issue of the Building Bridges Initiative, Honorable Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, to me this is very important because a lot of Kenyans have been complaining about being excluded from the mainstream government. And through this, Kenya is going to be a country whereby everybody will feel like he's part of it. And it was even very specific that through the census, the population census, and the NIMIS initiative, that they are going to make sure that every Kenya feels part of the government. The other important part, Honorable Speaker, is the issue of devolution, where the President did mention that up to now, 1.7 trillion has been pushed to the counties to make sure that there's development at that level. And Honorable Speaker, I'm looking forward to a situation where even these resources will be increased to make sure that we have more development at that level. Why am I saying this, Mr. Speaker? Because it is through devolution, Honorable Speaker, that Kenya is a country now, we are seeing development being spread all over the place. And actually, depending on how the resources are being managed from county to county, a lot of counties are benefiting and developing to levels which even are higher at the national level, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the other important issue which was mentioned in the speech, and which I think is important, Honorable Speaker, is the issue of the small medium enterprises credit scheme. Honorable Speaker, we are aware that now what we call the micro enterprises are suffering because of lack of credit. And this credit scheme, which is going to be introduced specifically for them, is going to be very good for this country. So this was another very important part of his speech. In terms of corruption, Honorable Speaker, the issue of corruption, he gave it a lot of time, but Honorable Speaker, I think it was an anticlimax. I think Kenyans expected to see action being taken on those people who have been said to be corrupt. even though he said due diligence will be done before people are taken to court, I think it is important, Honorable Speaker, Kenyans want to see action. They want to see people in court, people taken through the court process, and possible people convicted. So to me, Honorable Speaker, I think that area, it was an anticlimax, and I'm sure most Kenyans will agree with me. The other point which was important is the issue of returning the wealth. If you acquire wealth illegally, Honorable Speaker, it is important that if you are convicted, this wealth is taken back and becomes public resources, and they can be used for development. The other important thing, Mr. Speaker, which was said about corruption, is the issue where the President said, no institution should be, or no arm of government should be seen to protect any of their own, Honorable Speaker. We are saying, if it is judiciary, they should not protect any of their own. If it is parliament, so long as you're involved in corruption, parliament should not be seen to be protecting you. And I think that applies to the executive, Honorable Speaker. The other point, Honorable Speaker, I agree with the Honorable Member from Isiolo, the issue of drought. It was unfortunate, through all that speech, my Honorable Speaker, the President did not mention drought at all. And the country has gone through very tough times through drought. I wish you mentioned it. And the other thing which was also good, Honorable Speaker, because I can see my time is up, it was the issue of intergenerational equity. Honorable Speaker, we have spoken about this matter, in intergenerational equity, and more so when you apply to public debt, Honorable Speaker. It's important that we make sure we care about our future generations. With those remarks, I note the speech. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Next on top here is Honorable Lasso Ali, member for Saku.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this motion. I applaud the President for his address to this House. For once, he has proved continuously that he believes in this Constitution and he walks it. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about just 3 issues. The first one is education. The gentleman, Mr. Peter Tabichi, the best teacher in the world, it has demonstrated that Kenya, in terms of education, we are up there on the top of the world. But critically, when you look at our education sector, it is ailing. Between the KNUT, the Teacher Service Commission, and the Ministry of Education, the wrangles that is continuously being experienced, it is affecting so many things. The introduction of new curriculum, students' failure, mass failure in examination, cheating in exams, the localization of teachers, teachers' welfare, you name it. For those of us who come from the marginal areas and communities, we are actually affected by instability in education because Teacher Service Commission directors are posted there without you knowing. In 2-3 months, they are removed. Education is not getting the traction that is required. Therefore, we really call upon the new Cabinet Secretary for Education that he must put his foot down to make sure that education is on course in all parts of this country. In particular, I'm looking at the TTIs. At the beginning of the 11th Parliament, many constituencies received TTIs to be built in those constituencies. To date, many have not been completed. Some may end up in becoming white elephant. Mr. Speaker, the second issue is devolution. Some of my colleagues have talked about this, that the President said since 2013, almost 1.7 billion has been put in devolution. For those of us still from marginalized areas and communities, we feel that devolution is a new dawn. It has opened a new era and opportunity. But what is currently happening, devolution is being drip-fed from the Treasury. where as opposed to providing funds that is budgeted by this House, the Treasury gives counties money on monthly basis. I think that is really unacceptable if we really want to support devolution and build those counties. Devolution is a game changer, but for this game changer to be effective and achieve its raison d'etre, what should be done? The resources that is allocated by this House must go to the county, whether it is twice a year or quarterly. But the idea of drip feeding them monthly, I think it's not acceptable. On corruption, I think also some of the speakers before me have talked about it. I applaud the president because he said Kenya is a country that believes in the rule of law. Because of devolution, because of corruption, we are saying that certain projects are going to actually be lost out. An example is Badasa Dam that was started in Marsabit in 2008. To date, there's nothing to show for it. For that reason, the idea of a public gallery speaking or things in the social media should not stop projects that are of benefit to our communities. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Shall we have Honorable Osotsi Godfrey?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I support this motion, but I will need to make some comments on specific things, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, the Constitution requires the President to address Parliament on two key issues. That is the national values, as enshrined under Article 10, and also to report to Parliament on the progress on international obligations. I know most of the members who have contributed have been discussing a lot about the first item, which is national values. But I want to talk more about the progress made on international obligations. And there is a report that the President tabled, which I will encourage members to read through the report because it is containing very important information as far as achievement of international obligations are concerned. Mr. Speaker, in the report on the fulfillment of international obligation, I am concerned because Kenya is a member of 84 international organizations. And if you look at the schedule of subscription, you realize that most of those organizations, the country has defaulted on subscription. Mr. Speaker, this raises a major concern as to whether it is necessary for the country to continue holding membership in many international organizations. And I think this is an issue that I expected the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee to also talk about. It is a time that we need to audit our membership in all these international organizations. What is the value addition to our economy? Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I think the foreign policy of this country, which was adopted in January 2015, it needs to be looked at. I think we need to put a lot more emphasis into economic diplomacy and not just having a foreign policy that does not look at the economic benefits that our engagement with the international community brings. Mr. Speaker, I'm also happy that the Kenya has made strides in taking leadership of key international organizations. For example, Mr. Speaker, we are now in leadership of the African Telecommunication Union. We are in leadership of International Renewable Energy Agency, and also we are in leadership of African Court on Human and People's Rights. And this is progress that we are making as a country. And we know that the country is also lobbying to become a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. These are very strategic engagement, if well utilized, that this country can make progress economically. Now, coming to the issues of national integration, inclusivity, cohesion, and unity. Mr. Speaker, I was very elated when the President said there is no turning back on BBI. I have listened to our colleagues on the other side. One speaker even said that the BBI is amorphous. I want to tell that speaker that BBI is not amorphous. It is based on the 9 issues that were agreed between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the NASA leader Raila Odinga. And we need to respect. We cannot be saying we are supporting national integration on one hand, and then on the other side, we are saying that BBI is useless. And I want to encourage the committee that is moving around the country working on the BBI. Please speed up your work, bring the report. We are ready to implement the report as suggested by the President. On the issue of the Big Four agenda, Mr. Speaker, I noticed that the President talked about allocating 3 billion shillings to a revolving fund called Cherry Advance Revolving Fund, so that this fund will be available to coffee farmers. But I'm surprised the President never talked about the sugar industry. We know there is a task force that...
Order, Honorable Osotsi, your space is gone. Shall we have Honorable Obo?
Asante Bwana Spika kunipatia nafasi na mimi kuzungumza katika hotuba ya Rais. Bwana Spika, mimi ningependa mwanzo kumpongeza Rais. Alizungumza kama watu 100. Alizungumza hata zaidi 1000. Alizungumza kama kiongozi. Akazungumza mambo ambayo yatatuleta pamoja. Sisi wa Kenya, nchi zingine Afrika zinatutaja vibaya kwa sababu ya mambo mawili, na mambo hayo ndio Rais alizungumza. Wenzetu Kenya wanasema hapa East Africa, wanasema nyinyi shida yenu kama wa Kenya ni baada ya uchaguzi munagombana na munarudi nyuma. Sasa ikiwa paka majirani wanatuona, yeye Rais akizungumza, kwa nini watu wasione amezungumza jambo zuri? La pili, watu wanatuzungumza vibaya majirani zetu ni mambo ya corruption. Wakenya paka hii mambo ya uwiano na nchi zingine inakuwa ngumu, wanatuogopa kwa mambo hayo. Sasa ikiwa Rais ametambua na amezungumza, sisi tunafaa tuliunge mkono 100%. Rais amefanya kazi mwanzo, imekuwa rahisi. Bwana Spika, mimi na Mheshimiwa Mishi ilikuwa hatuangaliani kwa macho. Sahihi kwa sababu ya mirengo ya kisiasa. Sahihi tumeweza kufanya harambe. Nimeweza kumwita Katibu Atoli akaja kanifanyia harambe ambao haijawahi fanywa. Kwa miaka yote kutoka tupate uhuru Lamu, wakina mama hawajafanyiwa harambe kama hiyo. Amekuja hata hii vita leo tumepata hapa kutoka kwa Mheshimiwa Duale ni kwa sababu wameona kina mama wa Lamu hawajazoeleka kuinuliwa na wao kama kuwa sawa na kaunti zingine. Hilo limeanza kuwakera. Kina mama wa Lamu wameinuliwa, wamepata pesa milioni 10 na 700,000. Hilo ndio muhimu, na hata wakija tena kufanya harambee ingine tunawakaribisha waje washindane, tushindane kwa mazuri, hiyo pesa ingie Lamu, ya Lamu nayo iwe sawa sawa na kaunti zingine. Bwana Spika, nataka kuwatahadharisha wale ambao watakuja Lamu, wahakikishe wakija Lamu wasishikane na walanguzi wa dawa za kulevya. Lamu tatizo kubwa tulilonalo ni ulanguzi, na vita vinavyotokea vingi Lamu ni kwa sababu ya madawa ya kulevya, na wanauza wanajulikana, especially Lamu East. Wanauza ni watu wawili. Mmoja ni Hamza, ndo anayeuza, ndo anaharibu watoto wa Lamu. Hamza Athman Ali ndo anauza, na anajulikana, serikali pia wanamjua, mpaka wamempatia bunduki kumaliza watoto wetu. So namtahadharisha Mheshimiwa Duale akija Lamu asije kusupport walanguzi wa dawa za kulevya. Watoto wetu wameisha Lamu, tunataka suluhisho, na naomba serikali vile inavyofanya sahihi.
What is it, Honorable Malwa?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know Parliament is a house of records, and precedence has been set. Is the honourable member in order? Is the honourable member in order?
Order, Honorable Malwa is on the floor on an intervention.
Is the honourable member in order, Mr. Speaker, to mention a name, the purported person who is dealing with drugs trafficking in Lamu on the floor of the House, where the person cannot defend himself or herself unless she has evidence that she can table before this House to show that the accused person actually, he's the one that is doing the issues of drugs in Lamu.
Oh, who is this member? Honorable. Order member. You know, the House is proceeding. What you're doing is not right, honorable member. Anyway, honorable Wamalo, what you have just raised, I think is important. Not I think, it's certainly not very important. Honorable Ombo, being a house of procedure and a house that is guided by rules, you want to be very careful not to make a statement that when you are charged, you actually cannot substantiate. You want to navigate away from that line. Honorable Mohammed, please proceed from there.
Asante. Mimi nashangaa nikiona mtu mheshimiwa anauliza mambo na sisi tunaumia, kwani ana support ya hiyo mambo ya ulanguzi.
That member is on an intervention. He certainly could not be supporting. But please proceed from there, Honorable Obo.
Bwana Spika, ni mama naumwa na hali zetu, na mtu yoyote hapa member akienda kule ataona zile hali zetu. Bwana Spika, mimi nataka kupongeza serikali ile wanafanya sahihi, msako wahakikishe wale walanguzi Lamu wameshikwa, na nataka kusupport kumuunga mkono rais ahakikishe amesafisha kule madawa ya kulevya na mambo ya corruption na mambo ya kuleta pamoja shikane zaidi. Lakini Bwana Spika, naona taa imewaka na time yangu ilichukuliwa, so ningeomba nipewe nafasi zaidi. Vifo vingi vinatokea Lamu. Msichana mdogo miaka 23 ameuawa, amepigwa panga kwa sababu ya ulanguzi. Bwana Spika, naomba serikali ihurumie watu wa Lamu, sisi tunamalizika na ulanguzi wa dawa za kulevya. Naomba rais asikie jambo hili, kilio chetu watu wa Lamu. Sisi tumeisha Wabajuni especially. Kule dawa zimetumaliza. Msichana mdogo ameanza kupiga paka kina mama. Wamepiga kina mama, mama mdogo, msichana ambaye alikuwa ana
Honorable Obo, your space is gone. Shall we have Honorable Waweru Kiarie?
Mr. Speaker, I really appreciate this opportunity, and I rise to weigh in on this very important and critical business and add my voice to this debate on the President's State of the Nation address. Mr. Speaker, the President did present to this House 3 reports, and there was a report on national values, there was a report on our international obligations, and there was a report on the state of national security, Mr. Speaker. And the President's address was actually very poetic in its presentation. In fact, if there was anything to capture from the speech, is the words that he captured by saying that there is no turning back. If there was a heading to the speech that he gave, is that there is no turning back. And he enumerated a number of things that he's not turning back on. And this country is not turning back on. One of these things is that we're not turning back on the economic transformation of this country. Not turning back on Big Four. We're not turning back on fighting the enemies of this country. And we are not turning back on the intergenerational equity in this country. Mr. Speaker, the president was very clear as he pronounced himself, saying that we are not turning back on the Building Bridges initiative and the war on corruption. Mr. Speaker, the president did say that the reason why we cannot turn back as a country is because he wants this generation to bequeath a very stable country to the generations that come after us. As a parliament, Mr. Speaker, I think then we should pick the baton from where the president left it. And I've got to say that as the president said that he intends to be the president that delivers on this country, this house should also be the house that delivers on the promises that we give to the next generation. And for us to be able to do that, Mr. Speaker, I think that on the key issues, we've got to look at what is impeding development on these issues. On the economy, Mr. Speaker, to my mind, the biggest impediment to the development of the economy in this country is actually corruption. And as the speaker, as the president said, this is the fight for the soul of this nation. Mr. Speaker, there was a rider from the president's speech on this issue of corruption. He actually did say that the era of what you call vigilante justice is over. And in fact, due procedure needs to be followed in our pursuit of those we perceive to be criminals and who we perceive to be corrupt. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the Big Four, I'm making an offering here that the Treasury has to do better than what we saw on the budget policy statement, Mr. Speaker. We can only put our money where our mouth is. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, this Big Four agenda might just be dead on arrival. What we are looking at, Mr. Speaker, is a Treasury that is not innovative enough. We are not seeing any major policy shifts that would inform the development of the key sectors in the Big Four agenda. Mr. Speaker, on fighting the enemies of Kenya, I'd like to offer to this House some words that were said by a very intelligent man. He said that it is only a fool who lets someone else define the enemies for them. They went on to say that you cannot let your enemies define the enemies for you. Mr. Speaker, right now, if you look at our press, if you look at our media, it's awash with so much that is irrelevant to this country. We are seeing acres and acres of media coverage on issues called Tanga-Tanga, other issues called Kieleweke. And to my mind, Mr. Speaker, these are issues that are totally irrelevant to my people in Dagoretti South because they elected a member of parliament on a Jubilee ticket. I want to say that we can spend more of our energy on better things than branding individuals as one thing or the other. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of equity, I do believe that we can do better. And I speak about equity, speaking again about devolution in this country. The monies that we give to the counties on our division of revenue bill, Mr. Speaker, we need to see where they're getting invested in. There was an issue in Nairobi where a pronouncement was made that development should be done first in Eastlands before it gets to the western part of Nairobi. I would want to call upon the Senate to look into how monies that are allocated to these counties are being used so that we come to the issue of equity, Mr. Speaker. Finally, I'd like to say that it's upon and incumbent upon this House to walk the path that was enumerated here by the...
Very well. Honorable Yah.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I would like to note the President's State of the Nation address, and in my noting, say a few things. One, just like Martin Luther King delivered the speech at the mountain, the President's famous "No Turning Back" speech was delivered as a State of the Nation address. But I would like to say this, that the greatness of a nation is in how it equalizes its people at the economic level. Now, this country as we continue to pursue the things that the president said, must look at equalization of the areas that for a long time have continued to be marginalized. Unfortunately, the president did not discuss this or highlight his effort in trying to ensure that Article 204 of the Constitution prospers as intended by the drafters of the Constitution. Today, Treasury has been the stumbling block, the biggest stumbling block towards the equalization funds that the Constitution has bestowed in areas initially marginalized. Mr. Speaker, you look at drought right now that is ravaging this country. This drought is ravaging the areas that were initially marginalized. Why? Because there wasn't investment in a lot of the things that other areas were had bigger investment on. Why the Constitution put money specifically for these areas, knew that this was one of the ways of fighting drought. The president in his speech actually never talked about drought, and yet at that moment, the state of the nation was that the country was suffering severe drought. But in the State of the Nation address, the president did not see that as a problem of the country, and therefore just did not say anything about. Mr. Speaker, every year, this country goes through a cycle of drought, of cattle dying, of people dying, and yet we sit on a kitty that is 0.5% of the national budget to try to help and solve these problems. But this money is never released to solve this problem. I do not know whether the president in his mind feels he has no obligation to that article of the Constitution, because he swore that he will protect the Constitution. And one of the articles that I think he needs to look at and protect is Article 204 of the Constitution, to ensure that this country develops as one nation. The unity of a nation will not be judged by how much we speak about, but the unity of a nation will be judged about bridging the economic gap that exists in this country. And the economic gap that exists in this country is what brings disunity. And many of the countries of the world that have experienced the economic gap and the chaos that we have in this country have been torn apart because people see that they're not part of the center. Mr. Speaker, in the next State of the Nation address of the president, I'll hope and look forward to him speaking about issues that are important and pertinent, like the equalization fund. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say this, that joblessness and unemployment is a big problem in this country. Unfortunately, the State of the Nation address, the president did not address this, and how we're going to bridge that gap. Over 50% of the young people in this country are jobless. Universities are churning out young people out of universities and colleges to a jobless market. Mr. Speaker, this economy is not creating jobs. It is not creating new jobs. It is not creating opportunities for startups to have an opportunity. I'm glad the president talked about the SME fund that's going to cushion people who want to take loan to start in the small micro-enterprise industries. But then, what is it that this country is doing to ensure that jobs are created? Yes, the Big Four agenda talks about manufacturing and jobs and all that. But with the kind of discord that is in this government, the war within the government itself, how are we going to ensure that the Big Four agenda is achieved? Today, the courts have said that the housing levy is illegal and should not be charged. How come every time anything important that is said the government is implementing, the court goes ahead to stop it? We have seen the Huduma number suffering the same thing. We are seeing the housing levy suffering the same thing. Where is the problem? Do we have technocrats that think for this country, for this government, such that when something is implemented, it is implemented with the full force of law and that there is no impediment within the judiciary or any other sector? Mr. Speaker, I would have so much to say about the presidential speech, but because I'm limited by time, I want to thank you.
We really must have Gati Denita now. Honorable Gati Denita.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to support the President's speech. Honorable Speaker, the State of the Nation address was an inclusive speech, Honorable Speaker, and it really touched everybody. Honorable Speaker, it was a peaceful and uniting speech. And for that, Honorable Speaker, allow me to congratulate the President. Mr. Speaker, the speech started, Mr. Speaker, by there's a strong resolve by the President to say that our country is strong. Honorable Speaker, there's nothing as strong as that statement, that our country is strong, our economy is strong. Honorable Speaker, that is the assurance we as a people want to hear from the head of state. Honorable Speaker, the head of state went ahead to talk about unity of this country. And Honorable Speaker, allow me to single out the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative, Honorable Speaker. The President talked about allocation of 10 billion to the BBI kitty. Honorable Speaker, we have come as a country from a situation where people in this country have not really lived well. And it is good that the President decided, Honorable Speaker, to focus on healing the wounds, Honorable Speaker, the wounds of the post-election, wounds that are caused by politics, Honorable Speaker. And it is unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that even as the President strives to put up a kitty to support healing of the wounds, we hear leaders, Honorable Speaker, in this country who still open their mouths and speak on ethnic hatred. Honorable Speaker, it is wrong for this country. Honorable Speaker, any leader of this country who opens his mouth and speak against issues of hatred, issues of ethnicity, issues of issues of communities, Mr. Speaker, that is a person or a leader that must be stopped. Mr. Speaker, we are healing from wounds that have been inflicted in this country, and Mr. Speaker, we have no opportunity not to support the Building Bridges Initiative. Honorable Speaker, Agenda 4 is one of the serious agenda of Jubilee government, and I'm happy that the President really tackled Agenda 4. Honorable Speaker, the President talked about agenda for issues of manufacturing, issues of housing, Mr. Speaker. And as we speak, Honorable Speaker, I speak on behalf of persons with disabilities in this country that I represent. Persons with disability, Mr. Speaker, must be engaged in the implementation of Agenda 4 of the government in this country. So that, Mr. Speaker, when we are talking about housing, we are seeing persons with disabilities included and considered in terms of allocation of houses in this country. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about manufacturing. Persons with disability in this country should access mobility devices, Honorable Speaker, and manufacturing is there towards ensuring that any person with disability in this country who requires a wheelchair or a mobility device should be able to get. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, through manufacturing, our young people should be able to be considered in terms of manufacturing of these assistive devices that helps our people. Mr. Speaker, sir, the issue of corruption, and I'm happy the President talked about corruption. Corruption is killing into the economy of this country. We have so many people who have actually been implicated in corruption, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy that the President said there is no turning back. And I'm happy, Honorable Speaker, there will be no turning back on corruption. We have people in this country who have stashed cash outside this country. Those are people, Mr. Speaker, that must bring that money, and I'm happy that the President talked about returning money that has been taken away into other countries. Honorable Speaker, we want to see how we to strengthen structures of the DCI. We have to strengthen structures, Honorable Speaker, that promise to ensure that corruption and money that has been stashed outside the countries is brought back to building this economy. Honorable Speaker, I am happy that the President looked at strengthening the SMEs, the small, medium enterprises, Mr. Speaker. That is where our young people and traditionally people who have been marginalized find employment. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think in short, I want to say that the President's speech was a very, very inclusive speech. And Honorable Speaker, it is high time that everyone in this country supports the President, supports devolution, because devolution is what is causing issues in this country. We want to see the role of our governors, Honorable Speaker, and our counties in addressing corruption. It is persons with disability who suffer most when we have instances of corruption in this country, and women, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy that the President talked about having leaving behind a legacy that is a country that is.
The Honorable Ashiel.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the onset, I want to support the State of the Nation address by His Excellency the President, and quickly point out that I've been sitting here patiently. Some of these procedural motions that we propose, they work against us, because I have been listening to what members have been saying, contributing, and they are forced to rush into this speech and thereby compromising the quality of debate, Honorable Speaker, because the President laid down 3 key reports. And I think it was upon this House to allow members to go through the 10 minutes so that they can do justice on these 3 reports. Because, Mr. Speaker, you have heard what members have been contributing, and you find now them going through handshake, going through about devolution, and really not focusing on the 3 key reports that the President laid in the House. Of course, the international obligation of the Republic, which is key. And because of the time, Honorable Speaker, we have had a problem. The national values and the state of the nation security, Honorable Speaker, in future maybe, we need to give members enough time. Because this is a motion that will be debated, this report will be debated for 4 days. Today, the afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, and probably on Tuesday afternoon. Therefore, 10 minutes per member, I think it would have given us enough time. But now that we have already approved that, Honorable Speaker, on the national unity, and I want to challenge my brother, Honorable Adandi, when he said that a handshake, which is now 1 year old, that should not cascade down the ladder from the leadership to the other members of leadership of this country. That it is important. And Honorable Speaker, you may have noticed yesterday that despite the fact that Honorable Mawade was elected on Wiper Party and Honorable Cheng was elected on MDG, you may have seen the way members flanked these honorable members, and that actually tells you how this handshake is getting down, because Honorable Mawade was escorted by Honorable Makau of Mavoko and Honorable Cecil Mbarire, who is Jubilee. Honorable Cheng was escorted by Honorable Pio Andai and myself. And that tells you that issues of party affiliation is now, because of the handshake, is now it's now getting down, and that's why we are able to rally together as members of this House. Honorable Speaker, when it comes to war against corruption, which we really support as members of this House, I'm sure the President disappointed many members, and even those away from this House, because they expected the President to sack some cabinet secretaries, just like our colleagues were saying. But from the experience the President has had, and this was when he gave his State of the Nation address in 2015 or thereabout, when 5 cabinet secretaries were sacked from a report of EACC. And up to date, we have not prosecuted these cabinet secretaries. I think it is important, just like the President said, that we need not to follow the vigilante kind of justice. Let us go the full force of the law, so that we take this, whoever that has been involved in this corruption in the whole process, so that when he's making a decision on who to sack, he is basing on already a matter that has already been decided by the law. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I think it is important that as members, we support the President on the war against the corruption and the vigilante justice that we are now seeing, even some of our colleagues in this House going out there to now give the DCI 2 weeks, 1 week. I think that should not be allowed. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Asheli, you are on point. Indeed, it is better that even 100 people who are guilty go scot-free, but we ensure that the one who is innocent receives his day in court, and the rule of law, we must abide by it. So if you are going to prosecute anyone, I agree with you, you must have your evidence in order. There is no other way. We shall have the Honorable Kitty Chonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I rise to support this motion. I was here when the State of the Nation address was being delivered by the President, and I strongly support, like other members, more especially on the war of corruption. Corruption has turned to be cancerous in our country. Quite a number of opportunities are getting lost because of corruption. And indeed, if there is any member who will translate it to read otherwise, I believe he is not reading from the same script. It is actually our obligation for all of us to ensure that we support what the President is trying to do for this nation. All said and done, there are two key issues which I really wanted to hear from that address, Mr. Speaker, that I didn't hear. One is the issue of land. We still have lots of problems on issues of land. From where I come from, Coast Province, I'm really surprised, I don't know whether it is historical or whatever, that 80% of the government land lies in Coast Province. And what has been happening over the years? A good number of those who are in good records and good books have taken this advantage, they have taken this opportunity, translate that land from government property to their personal properties. What we are seeing is that every day when you read the newspapers, listen to TV, there are woes and cries of people being moved from their ancestral land because somebody somewhere has managed to get title deed from the headquarters, acquires the land, and people are moved away. I think this is not a problem that is affecting coast only. It's actually a problem which I've had in some other parts of this country, and I expected the President to mention something about this. We need a lasting solution to this problem because there is quite a number of people who have today been displaced from where they are, and there is quarters in their own land, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, that I also wanted to hear, it is the responsibility of the government to open up opportunities, more especially to make the economy grow, and also job opportunities for the youth. You and me are aware, sometimes, I can't remember the date, but last year, I think in October, there was a big conference here in Nairobi, which brought together the entire world on the issue of the blue economy. I think the blue economy is a new opportunity that Kenya needs to take advantage of and make sure that we open up this place so that people or youth can get jobs and also to boost our economy. This concept has not been exploited for a number of years. We know very well there is so much trade that is going on in the ocean. There is so much trade that is going on in our lakes, but we have not taken full advantage of this concept. I expected the President to give us a direction on what is exactly going on. We are seeing quite a number of companies actually, instead of now coming up, they are closing down. We have invested so heavily on issues like the standard gauge railway. We have invested heavily on the road networks. We are hearing that there are some more other networks which are being opened, but here is an opportunity that is going to make Kenya take a position on the world map. And it is the prerogative of the President to give direction of how soon this opportunity can be taken advantage of so that the generation to come can start on a better slate than where we are, because it is quite a long time that we have wasted without taking advantage of this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, because of time, as my honorable friend has said here, I think this is an issue which needs to be given ample time for members to contribute on, because it is giving direction of where the nation is leading. All said and done, I stand to support the State of the Art address by the President. Thank you.
Very well. The Honorable Nakuleu, member for Turkana North. Honorable Nakule, kindly move to the next slot. I think there's a problem with the system.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I wish to join my colleagues in giving remarks to the presidential address. Honorable Speaker, the presidential address highlighted a number of key issues which are pertinent to governance, growth, and matters of unity of this country. Honorable Speaker, on matters of unity, I totally agree with the President that Kenya must remain united regardless of its diverse culture, ethnicity, religion, and other aspects of divergence. Honorable Speaker, there is no country in the world that can move when it's not together. And President's initiative of putting the country together, putting all parties together, is the best way forward, and all Kenyans must support it. Honorable Speaker, on matters of corruption, corruption is becoming a chronic disease to all Kenyans, and it has eaten away all the gains, all the economic gains that this country would have had. If Kenya would have had a prudent way of financial resource utilization, it would have been playing the league of Singapore, Malaysia, UK, just to name a few. But because of eminent corruption, Kenya is facing what it is facing now because of our own habit. Therefore, as a member of parliament and as a leader from Turkana, I wish to support the President's direction on matters of corruption. But this corruption must be conducted within the law. Otherwise, we'll be criminalizing people who are extremely innocent. Therefore, it's only important that we follow the law while dispensing justice regarding corruption. With regards to the issue of BBI, which has been mentioned in the President's speech, building bridges initiative is a good initiative. But from the onset, I must declare my stand that as a Jubilee member, Jubilee leadership wasn't involved in the entire process. President might have meted a good idea, but the component of inclusivity, so that we own the agenda of BBI as Jubilee, as NASA, it wasn't there. That's why the initiative is now facing hurdles from both sides, both Jubilee and NASA. And it's only important that we be candid and talk it out. Otherwise, we would be misleading the President if we say everything is going well when it's not. Honorable Speaker, on matters of economic growth, it is true Kenya is struggling to grow. But I have a number of issues. The country can be growing if there is equity. The President's speech didn't touch anything about pastoralism. 12 or 14 counties in this country, in the last 1 month, were experiencing severe drought. But in the President's speech, there wasn't anything touching on issues of drought. What does it imply? Was it not an important issue to the President? Are the 12 counties less important to the President? The President ought to have addressed the issue of drought as a matter of national importance, and also to make the 12 affected counties feel that they are part and parcel of this country. The President also ought to have addressed the issues of equalization fund. 8 years below the line, 9 years below the line, that has not been implemented. And some projects initiated in 2016, 2015, have not taken off. How can we claim to be moving in the same direction when there is disparity in resource distribution? With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support.
The Honorable Ogutu Abel, member from Bomachoge Borab.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this President's speech to the nation. The Speaker, I want to say at the beginning that the speech does address three fundamental areas that are important to this country. It addresses the basic needs of every Kenyan. It also addresses the various ways the government is empowering individuals to prosper and develop their skills. And also it addresses the opportunities that individuals are being offered to serve this nation. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that in these three areas, there are gaps that ought to have been addressed to make the speech really different from the previous speech that we had last year. I want to begin by saying that one of our major problems is not the budget, is not the projects that are being allocated, but is the ability for these promises to be delivered. I would have wanted to see a statement that looks at how best are we prepared have we prepared the years to come to be able to deliver many of our promises. I look at the enablers. It talks about the enablers of the big four. It talks about so many, it talks about transport, it talks about education, it talks about energy. But I get the impression that I do not get a tangible pathway towards ensuring that these enablers are going to be enhanced, especially in most of the rural areas, so that the big four can be obtained. We're talking about education. We know how our education system has been disrupted by frequent strikes. Even the wider sectors like healthy. How are we going to see strikes, for instance, addressed in the successful years to come to ensure that the big four are delivered? I also want to look at the issue of disaster management in this country. Many speakers have already highlighted on this area, that we expected some commitment, some mission on how the government has worked to reduce vulnerability of our people to disasters, either because of starvation, either because of floods, or because of fires that are happening in the urban areas and even in schools. There is no single mission on what strides we have made towards ensuring that Kenyans don't become victims, even as we devolve resources to the counties. So I wanted to see, Mr. Speaker, some achievements and also some promises towards ensuring that we do not see Kenyans exposed to ugly situations just because some people somewhere have failed to do their duties. He talked about agriculture as one of the key areas. But I'm saying, and many of my colleagues have said this, Mr. Speaker, we have industries that are collapsing each day. We can see even maize production collapsing because of payment of maize over the last 1 year. We have seen the coffee sector dropping. I come from an area where the coffee factories, and other facilities have literally been abandoned. I would have wanted to see a situation, a statement on how much we have been able to rescue over the last 1 year, and how much are we going to move forward to make sure that some of these things are equitably supported. I also want to say that I would have wanted to see a statement on farmer confidence in general. Farmers are so disillusioned, not because they are missing the support they require from the government, but because they are being taken in circles when it comes to addressing some of the issues that are facing them. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that as much as I support this speech, I think the way the speech is formulated, we must be seen clearly to be coming from somewhere, to be going somewhere, and picking from there the successful year, so that we are able to account for the resources that are distributed. With those few remarks, I support the speech.
Member for Yatta, Honorable Kilonzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought the time would never come. Mr. Speaker, the President's state address had one strong word which I totally differ. And it was, I quote, "The state of our nation is strong." Mr. Speaker, now let's look whether that is true, Mr. Speaker. Let's look at the state of this nation in as far as corruption is concerned. Who can support that it can be strong, Mr. Speaker? In as far as corruption is concerned, it is very weak, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this is a country where we have introduced something which is not even the big democracies. When you get a criminal, you say, Mr. Speaker, this person should step aside. While in Japan, a simple train accident, the minister resigned. During the regime of Moi, ministers were being sacked. They were not being given option, Mr. Speaker, of a situation where, Mr. Speaker, there's somebody making noise, Mr. Speaker, here, consulting loudly. Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Ogutu, when you are making a contribution, you are allowed to do so without interruption from anyone else.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Allow the Honorable Kilonzo
Mr.
also
Speaker.
to make his contribution.
Mr. Speaker, I hope I'll recover the
The
time.
Honorable Ngujine, you will have an opportunity also, and we'll hear you when that time comes. Let him contribute. It's just a limited time, please.
Mr. Speaker,
Proceed, Kilonzo.
Mr. Speaker, this is a country where when somebody is suspected, and this somebody serving at the pleasure of the head of state, being a cabinet secretary or a minister does not make that office constitutional, that if you're a suspect or if you've been advanced cabinet. We have seen that happen in neighboring countries, Mr. Speaker, and even in the big democracies, in UK, in America. The president or the prime minister will sack you or relieve you of your duties anytime. But Mr. Speaker, in Kenya, you've seen cases where, and it happens so, Mr. Speaker, because the same people who are sitting in this government, as CSS, they're also controlling the judiciary. So, Mr. Speaker, can I also mention what is the state of the nation in as far as judiciary is concerned? It cannot be strong. It is very weak. Why so, Mr. Speaker? We saw the other day cases of examination council and our election IEBC. The guys who bribed in UK, the companies were fined and the suspects were jailed for 3 years and they have finished their term. While the guys who are with IBC, their cases are yet to be heard. The ones with the examination council are even serving in other, in other state corporations, Mr. Speaker, or even county governments, Mr. Speaker. So can we stand here and say the state of the nation, in as far as the judiciary is concerned, is strong? That is a fallacy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this brings the question of the state of the nation in as far as the presidency is concerned. Is it strong? It is not, Mr. Speaker. The presidency is under attack, Mr. Speaker. And that's why you hear of Tanga Tanga movement, which is attacking the president himself, and they come from the same party, Jubilee. And that's why now there's evolved another movement called Keloeke, Mr. Speaker. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, the president had no choice. What did he have to do? He had to get people to come to the rescue of the presidency. Ironically, that came from the opposition. His enemy number one came to his rescue, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the only thing I can see strong in this nation, in this speech, Mr. Speaker, and strong as a state of the nation, is only the handshake, Mr. Speaker. Because where we had moved, out of the 42 communities, say now 43 with Asians, Mr. Speaker, the 41 communities were convinced this nation belongs to 2 communities. But the president, in his own wisdom, and the leader of opposition, Mr. Speaker, have come to the rescue of the nation. So, Mr. Speaker, and that is the thing which is making, Mr. Speaker, the Tanga Tanga movement very bitter, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because of time, my position, Mr. Speaker, is there's more to be done. We as a country have to support the presidency if we are going to achieve the goals of this nation, Mr. Speaker. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I conclude my case.
I can see some of the comments have made some of the members hot under the collar. But everything is in order. The Honorable Waweru, it is, there's nothing out of order. We shall have the member for Mandera West. the Honorable Yusuf Haji. Just use the next one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ultimately, I've got the opportunity. I've been waiting for it from 9 o'clock this morning. I stand to contribute to the presidential speech, and I look at 3 issues. The first one being the unity or the unity of this country. That is where the president said that we are very united, and unfortunately, I do not disagree. I do not agree with it. In that, when you look at the administrative structures and the security system of this country, different parts of this country is treated differently. If I may take a very good example, an incident happened in Mandera a few weeks ago, where some Cuban doctors were abducted by Al-Shabaab, which of course is the weakness of our security system. That's why they were abducted. And what happened, what followed was that the whole of Mandera County was paralyzed by the security community by impounding all the vehicles that were moving, by arresting anybody moving on the streets, by putting a curfew that was not officially announced. And the economy of the county became at standstill completely up until today. The last 3 weeks, about 5 people have been picked from Mandera by the security agents, and nobody today knows where they are. Whether they are in jail, whether they have already been finished, because we have in the past seen where people were picked and ultimately their corpses were collected from some river somewhere. We don't know up to today where those 5 people who were carrying out their businesses were picked. And in that case, if the government's administrative system and the security system is very indiscriminate, some part of the country is discriminated that seriously, we cannot talk of unity. We cannot talk of unity. When it comes to development or the country being stronger, I think we were stronger in 1963. In 1963, anybody who wanted to go to school could go to school and finish his studies. Anybody who became sick could go to the nearest dispensary and get treatment free of charge and become well and go and serve this nation. In 1963, Kenyans were very united, except the closed districts of NFD, Northern Frontier Districts. And your Northern Frontier Districts were also united among themselves, although they were cut off from the rest of the country. Unfortunately today, let's say if a regional commissioner is today posted to Rift Valley, if there is some arrangements of the government, a new regional commissioner is posted to Rift Valley, the first question each one of us will ask is, huyo mtu alipelekwa Nakuru ni kabila gani? That is the first thing we ask. We don't ask what is his name. Kwanza tunauliza, which tribe is he? And that much, we have become so divided. We have become so much ethnicized, so much indeed, this country. So we cannot be thinking of, being very proud of being united. What we need to do, and what the presidential speech needs to come up with, is a strategy whereby we can come together, we can do better than what we were in 1963. But unfortunately, we are not. Coming to corruption. Corruption, I think, why don't we see people being jailed if they are facts? Why don't you only hear from WhatsApp and from the social media and others? Why don't we see at least some people going to jail or some assets being recovered? Why don't you only hear? The last thing about corruption is those who are bestowed to carry out this, the DPP and others, they are always on the media. Why should they be on media? They are doing corruption, they are doing work, and they are supposed to be investigating. When you go to media and you...
Honorable member for Mandera West, put yourself in the shoes of that person who is castigated on social media, that he is corrupt, that he's done ABCD, that is against the ethics of this country. And if it were you, and if we were to hold you to committee on that basis, would you be happy? You must ask yourself that question. We shall have the Honorable Mashogu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the Presidential State of the Nation address, which was done on the 4th of this month. Mr. Speaker, sir, first, we know that the purpose of the speech, and also when we go to Article 10 of our Constitution, which is on national principles of governance and the national values. Indeed, the foundation and the basis of success of any nation is principles of governance and the national values. Values of accountability, values of transparency, values of national unity, and all the ingredients that form that particular Article 10 of our Constitution. Kenya, our national development, Mr. Speaker, has been affected because so far we are not conforming to the Article 10, that is principles of governance and national values. And that's why we get that corruption in this particular country has reached threatening levels, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, it cannot be business as usual because what has affected almost each and every sector of the economy of our country, go to agriculture, go to education, go to water, go to dams, is nothing apart from corruption. So it has to be not business as usual, but something that has to trigger real action in addressing this particular issue for our country to get the kind of level that we want to reach as far as our development is concerned. The President did address himself to various issues of tackling this particular enemy, this particular cancer, but I think there is still much that requires to be done. Yes, we can see there is political goodwill, but Mr. Speaker, we have to walk the talk, the multi-agency approach, where all our institutions, right from the DCI, from the Director of Prosecution, and all those bodies, ESCC, have to do much more than what is being done now. Because Kenya should be comparing with the Asian tigers, Singapore and other countries, Korea, as far as development is concerned, but we cannot be able to reach that particular level because of our level of corruption that we are in. And Mr. Speaker, if really we cannot be able to get the culprits that we are supposed to get, is it that we have to think of declaring amnesty such that those people who have stolen public funds can be able to return the public funds within a given period of time? And I think as much as the President did address himself to this particular issue, he has to go a step further because, sincerely, if somebody is being investigated and there is some level of evidence, and that particular person continues to be in office, then Kenyans are not going to have faith in the war against corruption. So much more has to be done. Second, Mr. Speaker, the President was very categorical that there is no going back. There is no turning back on the building bridges. National unity is one other key thing that we have to embrace if our development has to reach a level that we want to reach. But when we are talking of national unity, which indeed is the prerequisite of our development, because tranquility and peace are key, we have to be accommodative such that we are putting each and every person along when we talk of national unity. because it is national unity that has to affect each and every part of the country. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the President talk of infrastructure fund because of the transition of 100%, and I will suggest that rather than that money getting the means of education, it is given to CDF, because over the years, CDF has proved that it can be able to manage the funds well, so that we are able to cater and provide the kind of facilities required in our schools, because so far they are lacking. In our counties, Mr. Speaker, we don't have enough because they're 1.7 trillion, and the percentage of 15%, and the functions.
Honorable Machogu, I remember, you know, you were an administrator in your previous life, and managing time is one of the most difficult things. We'll have the Honorable Duol Adhiambo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for opportunity to contribute on this important matter of the President's address. Mr. Speaker, I would like on the onset to say that in the address, the President addressed and indeed set a very key parameter. One, Mr. Speaker, as the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Kenya, he pronounced that he has heard the cry of the Kenyan people. Mr. Speaker, indeed, currently we can see that in our country we have challenges that range from negative ethnicity, which is really tribalism, that seeks to support anyone only on the grounds that they are from your tribe and not on any other parameter at times. We see challenges of unemployment, particularly untold among the youth, leading them to the kinds of challenges that make them get into some very undesirable behavior like drug abuse, adolescent pregnancies, and even child marriages. We see, Mr. Speaker, that corruption seems to have become something that is not only talked about at length, but seems to be defined as a culture of practice, because in terms of values, in terms of practices, in terms of what is admired and seen to be the way to go, would be perhaps to celebrate those who have found ways of sanitizing corruption. Mr. Speaker, we have a social breakdown of the family. Indeed, when we look around, we do not understand the sense of hopelessness and the desperation that has led to situations where spouses turn on each other, where parents turn on their children, and where society turns on the elderly. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I support the presidential speech, I would like to emphasize that it indicates what indeed is required when we in a country look at the kinds of challenges. We see the President acknowledging that the task before us is enormous. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the President, and I particularly would like to note that it is a good point that the President has indicated to us areas where we collectively would want to work so that we do not turn back. I want, Mr. Speaker, in the time that is available, not to elaborate too much, but to indicate that when we talk about the Building Bridges initiative, I have heard and I have listened with a lot of interest as colleagues have spoken not only about the handshake, but the attendant interpretation, which, Mr. Speaker, is their right. I wanted, however, Mr. Speaker, to humbly request, as we look as leaders of the nation, that given the kinds of challenges that we know that range from lack of inclusivity to unemployment to electoral injustice. Only yesterday, Mr. Speaker, as we were talking about the auditor's report on IEBC, we could see challenges, historical injustice. We've had talk that is related to the kinds of issues related to land and insecurity. To thank the President that among the issues that he says he is not going back to, there is no going back, devolution, the issue of ensuring that we can have some development based on the Agenda 4 items, and ensuring that we have economic development, and most importantly, the Building Bridges initiative. Mr. Speaker, I hope that we can all understand that our country, Kenya, after the 2017 elections and the manner in which we were in a state of indecision, required, among other things, a foundation stone to be laid. We can lay the foundation stone and then begin to walk the talk and try to grapple and handle the different areas. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, would like to really thank the President for recognizing that for us to lay the foundation of this enormous task, if we start with building bridges, then we would have an opportunity not only to work, but to ensure that our country is one that we leave for the generation to come in ways that we can all be happy about. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Ekumuntare Jackson, member for Samburu East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this presidential address. Mr. Speaker, when the President addressed the nation, we expected to tell us where we are and where do we want to go and how do we go to that point. And when the President talked about development, the whole nation expect the President to state some issues which are affecting the Kenyans and more so the marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, I thank the President for what he had said about the unity and what affected Kenyans. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, maybe there is something that the President may not be aware. Because if there are projects which the President started when he was the Minister for Finance, and up to now, those projects are not complete, Mr. Speaker, I think there is a problem somewhere. In my constituency, Samburu East, there is a line, electricity line, started when the President was the Minister for Finance. And up to now, that line has not worked up to today. And I think maybe the people who are supposed to give the President the information on the ground are not doing their work. Mr. Speaker, there are so many things in the places we represent. If the whole constituency, it is almost becoming impossible. There are no roads. There is nothing in some places of this country. And the money which the drafters of our constitution put, it is not even coming so that it will equip some other places to where the Kenya in other places is. And Mr. Speaker, I think the President should have addressed most of the marginalized places or areas so that at least they can move ahead. And my people were expecting the President to address some pertinent issues about the constituency. For example, we have people who do not have even food to eat. There is nothing. The drought is severe in other places. But the President has not mentioned anything about that. If there is nothing like that and no development issues we are seeing, then we feel we have been left by the address of the President. Mr. Speaker, government delivery services are not reaching other places. And if you look at the Huduma number, which is currently going on, the government has again introduced some other things which will hinder other Kenyans from even taking that Huduma number. For example, we know and we have mentioned in this house that there are places which even birth certificate is something very difficult to get. And right now, the government, it is a requirement that one must have birth certificate in order to take that to Huduma number. Well, we know, Mr. Speaker, even we got problem to register school-going children. And even the IDs, those services are not reaching, and we expected the president to address those challenges which are affecting Kenyans. Even water is an issue to some places. During this dry period, we are still talking of Kenya where there is no water, no roads, and nothing is going on. So, Mr. Speaker, as I support this president address, there are things which the president could have addressed, but he has not. Thank you, and I put my case there.
Honorable Mutua Barasa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice to the President's state address to Parliament. Generally, I want to support this motion, Honorable Speaker, but I have also a few reservations because when we talk of a report on national values, we need to really identify what are these parameters that can make this country, can make, some of us say whether we are on course or we are lagging behind. Same to even the national security. I would wish if the President would have had a few figures so that we know as a country in terms of protecting the borders of this country, whether we are really deteriorating or we are improving, because it's really very, very important. And also I will want to see in future that his commitment on the things that he will do for this country are things which we can measure in terms of when he will appear again before this House to address this Parliament, so that we know whether we are improving or we are deteriorating. Honorable Speaker, I also want to particularly support his statement on allowing the rule of law to take its course before actually criminalizing people. Because what we have seen in this country is a lot of rumor mongering that is aimed at assassinating the characters of some civil servants in this country. Because it doesn't make sense, Honorable Speaker. If you look at the number of corruption cases that have been reported through the media, and the social media, and through, rumor mongering in funerals, it will make you think that this country didn't have a government, but it had some kind of a casino where somebody will come in and walk out with the sacks of money. And really, to allow the rule of law to take its course, to allow the constitutional bodies that are mandated to carry out investigations do so that we can come out with a tangible report that is based on facts and evidence. Honorable Speaker, I would also want to say something on this Big Four agenda. We are aware that policies are made for public good, that policies are made to solve public problems, but some of the things that the government implements and that spurs public outcry, for example, these issues of housing, I know it's a good concept that is going to assist those that doesn't have homes, but as long as we Kenyans are not comfortable with it, because we are making these policies for them, so if they are saying we are not willing to allow our salary to be deducted for the housing fund, I think as a government should consider either terminating that policy, because we are making it for Kenyans. If the Kenyans feel it's not good for them, then unless if we are driven by other factors. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, in the spirit of reconciliation and in the spirit of the handshake, I'm just hoping that after we go to the general elections in 2022, that those fellows who are engaging in economic sabotage and taking this country backwards, those who are uprooting the railways, I hope that this time around they are not going to do so, because as a country we cannot be investing in infrastructure that will be brought down after elections. With these very few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to support this motion. Thank you.
The Honorable Nguchine, member for Imenti Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I stand to support the speech given by His Excellency the President, to the effect that it was a very strong statement, and it is said that Kenya is a very strong state. That's a fact, even though some of the members are doubting it, as my learned friend has done before, whereby he has said that there are some people who have been suspected to be corrupt, and those are criminals. I stand here before this honorable court to state that once is branded as a criminal only when he is convicted by a court of law. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I stand to be collected as it has
The
been
Honorable Arbele Malimo, member for Laisamis. What is
Yes.
out of order? The Honorable Nguchine, just hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I just wanted to put a record straight, Mr. Speaker, that this is not a court. This is a National Assembly. I want to remind the Honorable Member of Parliament for Imenti, if he can actually retract and apologize to this House that this is not a court. This is a National Assembly, just to remind him again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I apologize, Mr. Speaker, sir, I apologize. I know this is not a court of law. It's that I'm so much used to the court as an advocate that...
The Honorable Nguchine, allow me to cut you short, because our time has reached. You have used up 2 minutes of your time. You will have 2 minutes when this debate resumes. I presume in the afternoon today.
Most of it. Most of it.
So if you'll be there, you will have opportunity to start off the debate. The rest of the members, there's a lot of interest in this. As we stand now, there are 14 requests on my screen here. There's a lot of interest in this. We shall have this debate for the next 3 days. So members, kindly hold your horses, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to this. Honorable members, the time being 1 p.m., this House stands adjourned till today, Wednesday, 24th April 2019 at 2:30 p.m.